question. When you hear the words, "Who am I?" What's the first word that pops to your head?
Human.
Okay.
And I mean,
Well,
the
just one.
first
Just
word
one.
which comes is human, then soul.
Okay. All right. And whatever that word is, like, just keep that in your head. And I'm just gonna ask you a question around that.
Mm-hmm.
So think about, so okay, you were saying that first word that came to mind was soul. I'm sorry, was human.
Yeah.
And so just now imagine like everything that goes into that identity of yourself as human.
Mm-hmm.
And now imagine that that identity gets taken away.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
There is a nothingness.
Hmm.
I mean, there is a void. I mean, if I can't imagine myself as a human on the living space, I think there will be a void.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was also going through that exercise as I was suggesting it, and I was also feeling that way, that yeah, whatever that core identity is, if suddenly it gets taken away, like there's a gap there.
Yeah.
Okay, if I'm not this, I don't know what's left. I don't know what's there.
Mhm.
So it's bewildering. It's kind of confusing.
Yeah.
And now just think about this. Your answer is human, and Vaishali, whatever word came to your mind, how much of that was shaped by the context of this conversation? So, for example, you're in your lab or you're in the classroom, and somebody asks, "Who are you?" Would your answer be any different? Or if you got this question at work or at home, does your
Yeah,
answer change?
like in college, we will say I'm PhD student.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So it's very much dependent on the circumstances, the company we're around. And so if we're saying then that the sense of identity is fluid, it's conditional, why is that? Why are we a human in every circumstance or a PhD student in every circumstance? Why do we have these conditional identities? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Why would I call myself human in one group and I'd call myself a PhD student in another group? And welcome, Shivi. And why is this sense of identity not constant? What are your thoughts on that?
I think for different places we have different roles to play.
Okay.
Uh, like in the family, with mother you are a daughter, with friend you are a friend. So like that way you play a different roles.
Yeah, that's a really nice point. And there's this image that I want to show as well, which is really nice. When I was preparing for this, I came across this photographer that does some beautiful work that we can also look at in terms of the fluidity of identity, just based on relationships. So this is an artist who took a series of images and partially montaged them so that this woman is looking at a reflection of herself when she was much younger, holding her son. Now her son is holding her, and instead of a baby, she's holding what looks like a teddy bear. So the idea that the identity has changed from the caregiver to the recipient of the care, and vice versa, and then the child to the adult. So those roles, those identities are shifting. So not just according to physical place, but also kind of our life stage. And there's another, and everyone can see this picture, right? I just want to make sure I shared the right tab.
Yeah.
Okay, great. But just quickly flipping around, like, I don't know, they were very powerful images. I found them. And so there's life situation, there's stage of life, and then another thing that I wanted to show is how many of you have heard of the author and poet Maya Angelou? Maya Angelou? Okay. She's an amazing author and thinker. And she talks about identity from the perspective of masks that people wear. And in her case, it's not just a matter of my relationships with others as mother or daughter or husband or wife or whatever it may be, or as a certain activity like I'm a bike rider or I'm a runner or I'm a student. She looks at the identities that we carry as a kind of protection. So I'm going to go ahead and share that and play a video. It's like 3.5 minutes long. And I hope that you can appreciate this as well. Okay.
Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus.
That wasn't supposed to work out like that. So.
Team up. Oh my God, oh my God. Epic stories.
To honor this woman who helps us to survive. By her very survival, Miss Rosie, through your destruction I stand up. So I use the poem with Mr. Paul Laurence Dunbar's poem, Masks, and my own poem for old black men. Mr. Dunbar wrote Masks in 1892. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It shades our cheeks and hides our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding heart, we smile and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh my God, our tears to thee from tortured souls arise. And we sing, hey, baby, bye. We sing, hey, oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world think otherwise. We wear the mask. When I think about myself, I almost laugh myself to death. My life has been one great big joke, a dance that's walked, a song was spoke. I laugh so hard, I almost choke when I think about myself. 70 years in these folks' world. The child I works for calls me girl. I say, yes, ma'am, for working's sake. I'm too proud to bend and too poor to break. So I laugh until my stomach aches when I think about myself. My folks can make me split my side. I laugh so hard, I nearly died. The tales they tell sound just like lying. They grow the fruit, but eat the rind. I laugh until I start to cry when I think about myself and my folks and the little children. My fathers sit on benches. Their flesh count every plank. The slats leave dents of darkness deep in their withered flank, and they nod like broken candles, all waxed and burnt profound. They say, but sugar, it was our submission that made your world go round. There in those pleated faces, I see the auction block, the chains and slavery's coffles, the whip and lash and stock. My father speaking voices that shred my fact and sound. They say, but sugar, it was our submission, and that made your world go round. They laughed to shield their crying. They shuffled through their dreams. They stepped and fetched a country and wrote the blues in screams. I understand their meaning. It could and did derive from living on the ledge of death. They kept my race alive by wearing a mask.
For my meal kit delivery, I chose the
Thoughts on that? Okay. So if this sense of identity is fluid, it can be a form of protection. It can be a way of getting a sense of place. But it's always a shifting sand. When we're talking about something as core as my identity, who am I? If we're talking about something that fundamental, are we okay or satisfied with that sense of identity being always on a shifting plane? And just your thoughts on why is this a question even worth answering? Why is it important to understand who am I? And that's meant to be responded. It's not a rhetorical question.
Shivi, can you say something?
Because really that question, yeah, who am I? Yeah, I'm really thinking why that needs to be answered.
And that's okay if the answer is not.
Identity,
I'm
we
sorry.
want to prove something, gain power on the person is standing in front of us just by, saying that I am this, I am that sort of a thing.
And I apologize. I think there might be a weak connection. I wasn't able to catch everything you were saying.
Is it fine now?
Yes, it's more clear. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I was wearing the mask. Yeah. Maybe to, gain
Oh,
power.
sorry,
Gain
that's a little ironic you were wearing this, but
Yeah, got it. So yeah, maybe the person who is standing in front of us to gain power on them, we emphasize that I'm this, I'm that, to prove our superiority. Maybe because of that. I'm not sure.
Okay. True. And what do you see as the most valuable thing about understanding my sense of identity? Like, what do you have to gain by understanding who am I? Like, if we're saying identity is shaped by our life situation, the things we involve ourselves with, or maybe a way of protecting something more subtle, like our false ego, or our, let's say, our thoughts, protecting my sense of intelligence, or whatever it might be. Why do we need to even understand what that core identity is?
Very initial level, I think it's to survive.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's an excellent point. And I don't know, Saket or Vaishali, if you also wanted to add something to that about why. I mean, we're all here on this call for a reason. We want to understand who am I. So what is that driving force that makes this something worth spending your time to understand?
I think unless we know for sure what is our like who am I, then otherwise it's not clear what should I do. Like I
That,
think that is important.
that's very true. Yeah. That's an excellent point that you're adding to this, because if I identify myself as a certain type of person, then that informs the activities I do. But if the answer to who am I isn't clear, then where I should focus my efforts, my attention, my limited time is also unclear. It shapes our outlook, our desires. It shapes our understanding of the world around us. You see the world as you are is a common expression, one that I find very true. It also shapes our expectations and interactions with others. And I was reading this article, which was really interesting, talking about the repercussions, or at least one set of repercussions, of embracing an identity that isn't something innately ours, at least by the standards of general society, let's say. And an example that I read about, her name is Jessica Krug, and she was a tenured professor at George Washington University and an author and cultural researcher of Latin American and African history. And she posed herself as an Afro-Latina woman from the Bronx in New York, but recently was exposed / confessed to being a white Jewish girl from Kansas. And the interesting thing about this is she was considered a rising star in her field, and none of her research, at least to date, is in dispute. So the academic portion of it is more or less intact, but her identity, the identity that she assumed, is what's been causing an uproar and the loss of her position. So it's interesting that there's also a kind of societal expectation of what kinds of identity are more or less appropriate for a person given some kinds of metrics. And so to understand the answer to the question, who am I, means understanding the root and purpose of my existence. And so it goes beyond all of these things, like if we say, Saket, going back to the word you chose for the first thing that you would think of when asked who am I, was human. If that gets taken away, what's left? And so when we can answer the question, who am I, we can start to understand what is that, what's left, if these other more fleeting or temporary or conditional identities gets removed. So there's different layers or categories of identity. There's the body, there's the mind, and there's intelligence. So how do I know I'm not my body? So when I was looking this up, of what's the price tag if I was just to extract and compartmentalize all the elements making up this body, how much is it worth? So there's trace amounts of gold, of radium, a whole lot of potassium, a whole lot of water, so oxygen and hydrogen. And the market rates for that are, depending on the material, up or down. And so this physical body is only worth between $100 to $150. Okay, let's keep that number in mind. Now, there was also a stat getting thrown around that the values of things like the organ, depending where in the world you live, can be valued at up to a total of $42 million. That's a big difference between $120 to $160. And that's just like the market price for a pair of eyes is $3,000 apparently. I'm not sure how they got those numbers because I'm not aware of a thriving market for human organs, but you can get the gist of it. Or if there's a car crash, let's say there's an $80,000 car that gets totaled and there's a person inside it. What usually comes first to the scene of the crash? An ambulance or a tow truck? And in the case where the person is trapped inside the car, people will not hesitate to do further damage to the car to save the person. So there's the understanding that this body, at least as a body in and of itself, is not very valuable. But we go to great lengths, great expenses to try to preserve this body. So it's definitely worth more than just the raw elements of the body. With me so far?
Yes.
Okay. The other element of understanding maybe I'm something more than this body is I'm going to ask everyone, close your eyes. And I'll do it as well. And think back to your earliest memory, your childhood. And just play that scene in your mind right now. Just take 10 seconds even, just play that scene. Okay. And I'll ask you all a question. That person that played in your mind, you know, however you were 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 or whatever years old, was that you?
Not really. I just simulated myself as in some other form. Like, let's say I had a chance to look at my siblings who were younger than me, and I just visualized myself in them, kind
So
of,
if I
because
was
I don't
asking,
remember how I was looking, how I was behaving as child. I just heard about stories like how I was, so I don't really recall that.
okay, but I'm sure you had a memory at least when you were a teenager, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and that was you, right? Okay, so yeah, not to make this too complicated, but just the idea is there was that sense of I when we were younger, whether it was a teenager or a toddler or an older child or whatever it might be. That sense of I was there. Those are clearly my memories, my experiences, my impressions that helped influence the person I am right now. And today, that sense of I hasn't changed, right? Although maybe we're taller now than we were when we were small. I mean, not maybe, we definitely are. Our faces may look different, our hairstyles may look different, but that sense of this is me looking through these eyes, experiencing these things with my senses, that hasn't changed. Okay. Now, someone may argue, what about my mind or my thoughts, my feelings? Am I those? What would you say to that?
Not entirely true. My thoughts, not, my feelings also sometimes not entirely mine. Yeah, and it's yeah,
Okay, yeah.
it gets affected from the environment around me, I think.
That's a really nice point. Yeah, because I've had this experience. I'm guessing most of us have had this experience. Somebody says something, and it may be innocent, and then I'll feel very angry, like, how could this person say like da 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 da? But then a week later, somebody else could say the same thing to me, and I'll just brush it off, like, yeah, okay, yeah, maybe it's true. So the perception, the emotional reaction of it was different, but the words were exactly the same. So something was different with my mood, with my emotional state, with how my mind was processing, with acting and reacting to it. So we can look at the mind as the center of the senses, the repository of the feelings and emotions. So it's the processor and organizer of what is happening around us. It's a tool. So yeah, I'm not that tool. That tool assists me to navigate this world, to respond to things in this world. But the mind isn't who I am either. And the mind, though, plays a very helpful role in understanding the answer to this question of who am I. So in Bhagavad Gita, we're Vedic Vision Society, so we'll throw in the Bhagavad Gita. In the 6th chapter, texts 5 and 6, it says, one must deliver himself with the help of his mind, and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends, but for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So the mind can be there to assist us in the answer, or it can block us in understanding the answer to the question, who am I? And then the role of intelligence. That also grows, develops, evolves. And it can also be taken away. Intelligence acts as a discriminating factor. And to say that my identity resides with my intelligence, does that mean then that if a person loses their capacity to express intelligence, does that mean that they cease to exist? And so all of these different kinds of questions start to boil down to going back from the car crash and the value of the body all the way through the mind and intelligence. Just a very fundamental question. What's the difference between a living body and a dead body? What's the difference?
Mind dead.
Or what
Mind is dead.
is the difference?
And yeah, scientifically,
Mind is dead? Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And when you say mind is dead, what do you
And
mean?
you know, you don't respond to any of the external stimuli, right? You don't respond to any.
Okay. Okay, so there's no obvious response.
Yeah.
No vital signs. So does that mean then that if if somebody is on, let's say if somebody is on artificial ventilator and all their systems to keep the blood flowing through the body, to keep and flowing in through the lungs, but there's no activity in the brain and no exhibition of any kind of self-initiated, we'll say, symptoms, is that person still there? Is that body alive or dead?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, that's like dead only. Well, depends how do you perceive that situation.
Yeah, it gets a little tricky there. It gets tricky because then it comes to a question: is that body actually is that person alive, or is it just mechanical side effects of these different interventions? Because if it's purely mechanical side effects, then many people would argue that that person's dead, and it's just like blowing a balloon. You make the balloon go expand and then contract and expand and contract, but on its own, it's not doing anything. So what is that difference, though? Because if let's say somebody so the difference between the living body and the dead body is that there is some sort of consciousness that's gone. Like even in talking about when people pass away, that in a colloquial way they say, like, so-and-so has passed on, but the body's right there, but something is different. Like that person lying on the funeral pyre or laying in a coffin is physically that person that we've maybe loved, interacted with throughout our lives, but we say that person has gone. So even in just the way we speak about the dead body, there's an implicit difference in the person versus the body that remains there. And that difference in from a Vedic perspective is that presence or lack of presence of the soul. So again, going back to the Bhagavad Gita, it describes that the soul is the source of that consciousness that emanates throughout the body. The soul is that animating force. So specifically in verses 16 through 18, those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance. So the material body is going to fade and go away. And of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both, and that the soul which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. And the material body of the non-destructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. So here we're being given some information or understanding of the relationship of that animating force, the soul, the seat of consciousness, and what the Bhagavad Gita describes as that perishable, destructible material body. So this physical body that we inhabit. And it's kind of interesting to look at this body as constantly being in a state of construction and destruction. There's a stat thrown around that every, I think it's 7 years, the entire body is recycled. So all of the, or nearly all of the body's cells from 7 years ago or older are no longer within this body, that this is all constantly being regenerated. So my hair grows, new skin cells grow, I get a cut, it heals, bruises heal, we grow older, we grow taller, maybe wrinkles start to appear, hair starts to fall. So the body is constantly evolving. And it's ultimately being destroyed and reconstructed, but it's also a machine with a lifespan. So the concept that the soul is the seat of consciousness, but that the body is merely a vehicle with which the soul can interact with this world around us. And Bhagavad Gita puts it really nicely later on by saying, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. And the nature of the soul is that it can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. This individual soul is unbreakable, insoluble, can neither be burned nor dried. And sometimes my friend and I sometimes joke around like it can't be steamed, it can't be baked, it can't be broiled. Yeah, just kind of joking around like that. But the idea is that the nature of the soul is that if I am convinced I am not this body, I am a soul, then I can literally understand myself as indestructible. If I understand myself as an indestructible soul rather than this perishable temporary body, what are some side effects of that?
Being fearless.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Karthik.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, how are you? Sorry,
Oh, good. Nice to see you again.
I think my material body wanted to work, so I had to give attention to that. Money, you know. Apologize for that.
Well, just asking though, like if I identify myself as a soul, what are some side effects of that?
I was just saying, so being fearless. So what I mean by that is whatever decisions you take in life, preferably positive ones, you can go all in, right? And like if I want to like dedicate myself for a cause, then I think if I have the attitude that I am my soul and not the body in that sense, then I can go all in give it everything, undevoted attention.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by fearless. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, if I say like Karthik or Shivi or Vaishali or Saket, like if I say you are indestructible, you are eternal, you can't be cut to pieces by any weapon, you can't be burned by fire, you can't be moistened by water and withered by wind. You're unbreakable, insoluble. That's pretty powerful. So why is it so hard to think like that? And by the way, in me saying these things, I still am very much identifying with myself as a body rather than a soul. So I don't mean to position this in a way of like, come on, what's wrong with you kind of a thing, because we're all in this together. And it's a very much a gradual understanding and moving toward that, because we're working up, we're battling against a lot of baggage in that sense. But why is it such a struggle, given that it sounds so appealing to identify in that way?
Is that a rhetorical question, or is it a question for the audience?
It's a question for all of us, yes.
In my opinion, it's similar to putting the body on a diet, right? We know that oily foods make us fat. We know eating unhealthy food will make us fat, but we are so habituated by it, by the Maya, so-called, of those delicious food that we go and have one sweet after the other, have chana masala and whatnot, and you know, that gets added up. I know some people may probably feeling hungry by now, but that's how habitual the body has become now, right? So I think it's like breaking that habit. That's the I think that's the reason why we are still going around in that circle. And thanks to COVID, we can't even have those personal connections or motivation. Still, people who are a role model for us, at least in the temple. I used to see you. I used to see all other Prabhus. Are like, okay, I need to do something. I need to change myself. But thanks to COVID, we can't do that anymore. So
you can still eat chana masala.
To chana masala, not go beyond.
Some other thoughts. What are some other thoughts? Why is that so hard? So Karthik, thank you so much for sharing that. That was a really nice point you were raising. What about others? Why is it hard? Okay, so Vaishali, if I was to ask you, okay, let's say from today onwards, you will identify yourself as a soul. What do you do?
Yeah, it's really hard, because I think we always think from body perspective, like what we like to eat, what we like to see, and like all what we like to hear. So it's, I think our all movements are related to body right now.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Like I mean, like to identify with the body, because like right now I'm kind of seeing myself in the camera, or like I wake up, I take a bath, and I see myself in the mirror, or I just use my body to hold things. Like this body feels pretty real to me. So to understand, like, okay, actually this is the vehicle that the soul is, that me as soul is animating and engaging, it's a bit of a jump. Because one example given is the soul in relation to the body is much like the driver in relation to the car, where when we're inside the car, I mean, there's self-driving cars soon, so we'll just kind of table that whole concept. But for most conventional cars, there's a driver that gets in, pushes a button or inserts a key, and that animates the car to certain motion. Accelerate, decelerate, stop, whatever it might be. And as soon as the person gets out and turns off the vehicle, not in that order, the car appears dead until another person enters it and animates that car again. So in that sense, the difference between the driver and the driven is very clear. But Vaishali, to your point, when there's not the concept of soul entering and exiting this body in a frequent way that I am cognizant of, then it becomes much less clear to perceive that. And so, Kartik, to your point, we're kind of battling. In a way, it's an uphill battle to try to see anything other than this body, even though we've already talked about the many ways in which it's clear that I'm not this body, I'm not this even mind or intelligence. So even just from a logic perspective, it makes sense. But from a practical day-to-day perspective, it's really hard. But as with any recovery program, recognition is the first step. So I think in terms of our journey to answering that question, who am I? And I hope that we have realistic expectations that really from the core of our hearts, understanding the answer to the question, who am I? It's not something like, okay, 1 hour Vedic Vision Society, done. Now I'm going to live my life like this. It's a journey. And this is just the beginning of that journey. Now, just wanted to share a little bit more. So in the Bhagavad Gita, and this is chapter 2, and it's a really beautiful chapter. It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, and immutable. Knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. Some look on the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. So if I was to understand I'm not this body, I'm actually a soul. So as Kartik was saying, what's there to fear? Because the activities that normally would give us anxiety, am I going to pass an exam? Am I going to get a coveted position? Am I going to be able to find work in my field? Am I going to have good health for the rest of my life? Starts to not feel so important. And even just the sense of this relative importance based on our circumstance, like let's think back to our teenager earlier years. Was there an exam that any of you have ever taken where you just totally freaked out about the exam? You know, with the perception like this is my life and death.
How about every exam?
What's that?
How about every exam?
Every exam, oh my gosh.
Especially the final ones, you know, where it's like your boards or 12th boards, 10th boards. That was like,
Okay.
you know, your family always says, that's the most important exam of your life. And then you realize, no, it's not. Every exam is an important life, you know, that's never going to stop. I mean, today we are working and I need to take a certification in the office, you know, a certification exam in the office. And that's the important exam. I don't think about the past exams. So
Yeah.
these things don't have a full stop or don't have an ending. And that's the
Yeah.
fear.
No, I'm going to put myself on a limb, and if you're not comfortable answering this question, that's totally okay. But how many of us have ever failed an exam? Okay, Kartik.
I did.
Okay. Now the one person, and sorry, Shivi, I don't know you very well, so I can't speak. But Vaishali, maybe you're one person that I would say maybe never failed an exam.
No, I failed one certification exam.
Oh, okay. Shivi, you're in the failed an exam boat.
Sorry? Yeah.
Oh, you
Yep.
failed an exam too?
And it taught me, like,
Okay.
there are always retakes. No issues.
Yeah, that's very true. But let's think back to that moment that you found out you failed an exam. What happened? Like, what happened right away?
I think fear of getting beaten up by my parents.
Oh, okay.
Second that. And also
Same
self-doubt.
for me, I think.
Wow, okay. But what happened the
No,
next day?
however, my parents made fun of me, when I failed. I mean, I was never beaten for, failing in exam, but yeah, they usually made fun of me. Okay, he failed. They made me feel embarrassing so that he work harder next time.
Okay, so it was a different kind of beating. It was a little bit more an emotional beating, it sounds like.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, but what happened though 1 year from then? 1 year later, from that moment that you failed that exam, what happened?
It eventually faded. The fear eventually faded.
Okay, the fear faded. What else?
Nothing. It's still everything remains same. And when I look back, I just look at it as just as a phase.
Yeah,
It was just a momentarily, like I might have failed, but it doesn't define anything.
yeah. You still wake up in the morning. You're
Yeah.
still where you're at today. And maybe it wasn't even such a big deal. Like,
Yeah,
if you fail in
yeah,
it,
like Shivi said,
go ahead.
it's okay. Like try again.
Yeah, try again. And maybe it's not a literal retake of an exam, but there's other opportunities. And many times, at least I've experienced, what seemed like this is life and death really wasn't. Oh, wait, Karthik, you're raising your hand. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I had a recent failure, and it was a driving test. I think many of you can relate to this. I failed twice. And I know in a year you get only 3 chances to clear your driving test, and then if you don't, you need to retake the written test and all this, the big cycle. So and then in that fear of not being able to clear the exam again or clearing the test again, I joined a driving school, right? And that's when I realized the mistake is not on the inspector or the driving inspector. The mistake is on me. I made some blunders on the road, and I'm so fortunate that he or she failed me twice so that I could learn, use the opportunity to come back to the exam with a with a learned mindset from my mistakes. And I think that's where you're trying to get at too, but correct me if I'm wrong.
That's an aspect, though. That's a direction that's really intriguing. But I was thinking more from the perspective what seems like life and death, just from the perspective of my bodily need or my mental need or my intelligence need, really isn't so consequential. Like, our mind has a habit of amplifying something as this is it. And then 1 year later, you may not even remember you failed the exam. And so what seemed in that moment as this is it might not have actually been. So if I take myself then from that more limited short-term perspective of I am this body, I am this mind, I am the sum of the relationships around me, I am the sum of my accomplishments, of my place in life, then that's always going to be the case. But if I see myself as soul, indivisible, unbreakable, cannot be burned by fire, cannot be moistened by water, cannot be withered by wind. Things like fear, even qualities like envy, start to dissipate. And that's a whole other topic that we'll save for another time. But I just wanted to kind of leave with this thought that when we see ourselves as a soul, or even intellectually, we can start to conceive of that idea that I'm not this body. then we start to see ourselves and others in a whole new light. We start to see our endeavors, whether it's our classwork, our classrooms, or our professional work, or how we interact with our friends or family. We start to see that in a new light and start to understand, like, what is the basis of my relationship with these people and these experiences? And then also, if we accept the soul as that animating force that is indestructible, it introduces concepts for future VVS discussions like reincarnation. Or, okay, I'm a spirit soul, what am I supposed to do? And so there's a quote that I wanted to share on the individual soul. An individual soul is understood in three aspects. First, as the consciousness pervading the entire body, then as the spirit soul within the heart, and ultimately as a person. So who am I? A soul. What is a soul? So the Vedic conception of the soul is it's full of knowledge, full of bliss, and it's eternal. And it's a person. It's a person. So when we understand the soul as a person, what comes along with that? Personality, preferences, meaning likes, dislikes, activities. So I'm going to use that as a launching pad to next week's topic, where we're going to talk about some of the filters that get in the way of my perception of me as a soul and start to affect how we perceive the world around us, the things that drive our tastes, the type of people we interact with. So we're going to talk about that next week. And it has a working title called How to Live Life Uncensored. I realize we're almost at the hour. Are there any closing thoughts? Okay. Oh, you don't have to raise your hand. This is meant to be a more discussion. We're just chatting.
Okay, so I mean, I'm really excited for the next one because of one single aspect that you added from the code, that the soul has answers to everything. It's unbreakable. It's all knowledgeable. So if it is all knowledgeable, and if it's like an untapped potential, as you call it, why aren't we able to tap that potential? What's blocking us from tapping into the potential? I'm looking forward to the next.
I like how you word things. I feel excited by what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, if we have the solution to all problems, why aren't we? Why can't we? That's a question which I personally ask every time. So.
Okay, cool. Well, hopefully that'll be an interesting part of the discussion. Then thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Any other
so
thoughts?
it was my first session, and some of the topics really got me thinking. So I think I'll continue to attend the next sessions, and so I'm looking forward to it. Really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Awesome. Looking forward to hearing from you as well. Thank you for that. All right. If there's nothing else, oh, Vaishali, you wanted to share?
Yeah, thank you so much, bro. Like, this is nice because though we hear continuously, we are not body, we are soul, but I don't think we exactly know what does that mean.
And that's part of so the reason I was emphasizing earlier that the answer to the question, who am I, this is just a starting point. It's a journey to peeling back that sense of identity and just understanding that question from different angles to reinforce what does it mean to live by that growing sense of identity. Again, it's not like I flip a switch and suddenly I'm going to operate as, okay, I'm a soul, I'm not this body. But there's just different things to consider when we're moving in that direction. And even signs of, am I really moving in that direction or am I moving away from that direction? So hopefully next week when we talk about these different filters, that'll give additional insight into maybe why sometimes it is really hard. So thank you for sharing that. All right. If nothing else, thank you so much, everyone. It's really wonderful to have you all here. And nice to see you all again. And nice to meet you, Shivi. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And we'll talk next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.